The great hall of the alien palace glowed with silver fire, its pillars taller than any tower a human had ever built. The floor polished like a mirror. Hundreds of alien nobles stood in rows, their armor shining, their eyes fixed on the small figure at the center of the chamber. That small figure was a human, only 6 feet tall, wrapped in a plain black coat, his hands calm by his sides. His name was Daniel, an ambassador sent by Earth to speak with the alien empire. But the aliens did not welcome him with respect. They welcomed him with laughter. At the end of the hall, seated on a throne made of crystal bones, was the queen. She was 8 feet tall, her skin pale like moonlight, her crown alive with glowing veins of blue energy. She looked down at Daniel the way a hawk looks at a mouse. Her lips curled into a smile that was more cruel than kind. "So this is the human they send me," she said, her voice echoing like thunder in the chamber. Fragile bones, soft skin, tiny frame. She leaned forward, her long claws tapping against the throne. "And they dare to speak of standing equal to my kind?" The nobles burst into laughter, the sound rolling like waves. They struck their staffs on the ground, mocking the idea of humans being worthy. Some whispered insults, some spat near the floor, all of them waiting to see the human break under the weight of shame. But Daniel did not bow his head. He looked up at the queen with steady eyes that did not shake. He spoke in a voice calm and low. "I did not come here to be measured by size. Queen, I came here to be measured by worth." The hall went silent for a moment, then louder laughter followed. The queen leaned back, her silver eyes gleaming with amusement. "Worth?" she repeated, her voice sharp. "You are nothing, human. Your body is weak, your world is young, and you think you can share breath with me?" She raised her hand toward her court, her long arm casting a shadow over Daniel. "Shall I tell them what your people dared to whisper? That a human male could ever join with a queen like me? That a seed so small could ever take root in the blood of a goddess?" Her words echoed, and this time the laughter was crueler, sharper. The nobles roared with delight. Some even knelt as if in mock prayer to the absurd image. Daniel's heart pounded, but his face remained still. He answered, softly, "Every seed grows in the right soil, Queen, even the smallest." The queen froze for a fraction of a second, her smile faltering, but then she threw her head back and laughed, the sound rolling like a storm. "Bold little creature," she said, her voice shaking the crystal walls. "You speak of planting. In the soil of gods, you dare stand here fragile and tiny and imagine breeding with me?" Her hand clenched the throne arm, her nails cutting lines into the crystal. She rose from her seat, towering over everyone, her long gown dragging like smoke. Every step she took made the ground tremble. She came down from her throne and stood before him, 8 feet of power and pride against 6 feet of calm human flesh. She bent down until her silver eyes locked into his, her breath cold and sharp. "Tell me, human, do you not tremble?" Daniel's lips curved into the smallest smile. "I do not tremble before what I respect," he said, "and I respect the strength before me." For the first time, the hall fell silent. No noble laughed, no one moved. They waited for the queen's wrath. They expected his blood to be spilled on the shining floor, but the queen only stared at him, her smile frozen, her eyes flashing with something no one could name. Was it rage, or something else? Her chest rose and fell, her claws flexed, yet she did not strike. Instead, she turned sharply, her long hair whipping through the air like a blade. "Take him to the guest chamber," she ordered coldly, her back to him. "Let him rest before I decide what to do with him." The guards moved quickly, surprised by her command. They expected to carry his body away, not his living form. Daniel walked calmly, his steps steady, never once looking down. The nobles whispered in shock, their voices sharp and full of confusion. Why had the queen not killed him? Why had she let him speak and leave alive? When the chamber was nearly empty, the queen sat back on her throne, her claws tapping again, but this time her smile was gone. Her silver eyes narrowed, and her hand touched her chest as if something stirred inside. She whispered to herself, words no one else could hear. "Why do his eyes not leave my mind?" And for the first time in many years, the queen did not laugh. She sat in silence, her breath heavy, as if the fragile human had planted something dangerous in her heart. The next morning, The alien palace buzzed with restless whispers. The story of the human who stood before the queen without fear had already spread. Nobles and soldiers mocked him in private, but in their eyes hid a question they did not want to admit. Why had the queen spared him? The queen herself sat in her private chamber, her long fingers tracing the edge of a silver goblet. She tried to dismiss the thought of the human, but his calm voice and steady eyes refused to leave her mind. It was like a thorn hidden deep in her chest, and no matter how she pressed it down, it pricked again and again. Her advisors entered, tall warriors in black armor, their voices sharp. "My queen, this human must be tested," one of them said. "If he claims to be worthy, let him prove it before all." The queen's lips curved slowly. She liked the sound of it. If she broke him in front of everyone, his arrogance would end, and her mind would finally be free of his shadow. She rose from her seat, her silver crown glowing brighter. "Very well," she declared. "Let the human face the trials." The word spread like wildfire. The trials. Ancient tests designed to break slaves, warriors, and sometimes even traitors. No outsider had ever faced them, much less a fragile man from Earth. When Daniel was told, he only nodded calmly, his hands steady as ever. "Then let me face them," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The first trial was in the pit of strength, the arena filled with alien soldiers and nobles shouting. A beast was released, a scaled monster twice the size of Daniel. With jaws sharp enough to break stone, it roared and charged, the ground shaking with every step. The crowd laughed, certain the human would be crushed in seconds. But Daniel did not run. He waited, eyes sharp, his body low and ready. When the beast lunged, he rolled aside, quick and precise, his movements clean. He picked up a fallen spear, small compared to the creature, yet in his hands it became a weapon of will. The fight raged, the beast's jaws snapping inches from his body, its tail sweeping like a hammer. Daniel was thrown once, blood staining his coat, but he stood again, teeth clenched, refusing to surrender. Finally, with a sudden thrust, he drove the spear into the beast's eye. The creature roared and collapsed, the ground trembling as silence fell over the arena. The nobles stopped laughing. They stared in shock. Some even clapped unwillingly. The human had survived what many of their own soldiers had failed. The second trial was of wit. In a hall of puzzles built by the ancestors, walls of shifting stone and glowing runes, the alien scholars smiled coldly, thinking a primitive human brain could never solve what their own brightest struggled with. But Daniel studied the walls with patience, tracing symbols, listening to the hum of the ancient runes. While others grew frustrated, he remained calm. Step by step, he mapped the pattern, and in less than an hour the door of light opened for him, the hall glowing as if in respect. The scholars stood silent, their pride cracked. The third trial was of honor, the cruelest of all. Daniel was thrown into a chamber with a broken alien slave. The nobles expected him to exploit the weak creature to escape, but Daniel instead covered the trembling alien with his own coat, shielding him. "No one deserves to be broken," he whispered, refusing to leave until the guards finally pulled him out. The court was shaken. The queen watched all of this from her throne, her silver eyes narrowed. Every time she thought he would fall, he stood again. Every time she thought he would fail, he found another path. And every time he acted, it was not with arrogance but with quiet strength. When the trials ended, Daniel was brought before her once more, his body bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes still steady. The nobles whispered in confusion, some angry, some impressed, none willing to admit the human had shown more worth than expected. The queen rose, her tall form glowing in the light of the hall. She walked down to him, each step slow, the chamber holding its breath. She stopped in front of him, her shadow covering his body. "You have survived what others cannot," she said, her voice sharp but softer than before. "But do not mistake this for victory, human. These were only games." Daniel lifted his head, blood on his cheek, but no fear in his eyes. "Strength is not a game," he answered quietly. "Honor is not a game. Life is not a game, Queen, and if you think it is, then you have already lost." Gasps filled the chamber. The nobles looked at each other in shock. No one ever spoke to the queen like this and lived. Her claws flexed, her eyes burning with silver fire. She could crush him with a single strike, but she did not. Instead, she turned, her long hair brushing across his face as she passed. "Take him away," she commanded, her voice colder, sharper, yet beneath it something shook. Later, alone in her chamber, she stared at her hands, her mind heavy. His words replayed in her thoughts. She whispered again to herself, "Why do his eyes follow me, even when he is gone?" And though she tried to laugh as before, no sound came, only silence and a strange unease that no battle had ever given her. The palace grew restless after the trials. Whispers ran through its halls like fire through dry grass. The human had not only survived, but left many nobles silent with shame. Soldiers spoke of him in secret. Servants repeated his name in the kitchens. Even slaves looked up with quiet hope. But none of that disturbed the queen more than what stirred inside her. She sat in her high chamber, the crystal windows glowing with alien light, her long fingers tapping against the throne, her silver eyes, sharp and yet her mind unfocused. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the human's steady gaze. Every time she tried to rest, his calm voice returned. It was not desire, it was not even respect. It was something else, something deeper, and it angered her. "This is weakness," she told herself, her voice cold. "He is nothing. His people are nothing. He will not stain my mind." But her heart beat faster with every denial. One night the queen called for the ancient seer, a woman wrapped in robes of shadow, her voice cracked with age, her eyes glowing faint blue. "Tell me, seer, why does this human disturb my spirit?" The seer lowered her head, her voice quiet. "Because fate has brushed you both, my queen. The bond has been cast." The queen's claws tightened on the throne. "Bond?" she repeated sharply. "Between me and him? Impossible." But the seer only bowed deeper. When two souls cross under the light of the trials, sometimes the bond awakens. It cannot be broken. It cannot be ignored. The queen dismissed her, with fury, her chest burning, but when the chamber grew silent again, she could not stop trembling. That night, her dreams were not her own. She stood in a field of starlight, endless skies above, and across the distance she saw him, Daniel the human, his form glowing faintly. He looked at her without words, without fear, only with the same steady eyes that had followed her in the waking world. When she woke, her chest was heavy, her skin warm. She clenched her fists and hissed, "No, I will not bend to a human dream." But the bond was there, whispering inside her like a song she could not silence. The next morning, Daniel was led through the palace gardens by guards, his steps calm as ever. The nobles glared at him. Some spat insults, but he did not answer. His eyes only wandered to the strange alien plants glowing softly. From her balcony above, the queen watched him, her lips tight. She told herself it was only curiosity. Yet when his head lifted, and his gaze met hers across the distance, her breath caught in her throat. She turned quickly, her crown shaking. "This is not real," she whispered. "I will crush it myself." She decided to test the bond, to break it before it grew. In the council chamber, she called him again, standing tall and proud before her nobles. "Human," she said coldly, "you will face me, not in battle, but in spirit." Daniel lifted his head. "And how will I do that, queen?" Her lips curved faintly. "Through the bonding ritual, you will stand before the sacred fire. If the bond is false, it will burn you to ash. If the bond is true, it will reveal its mark." The nobles cheered with delight, certain the human would die. But Daniel only nodded calmly. "Then let it be done." The ritual chamber was vast, its walls lined with glowing runes, a great fire of silver flame burning in the center. The queen stepped into the light first, her tall form glowing. Then Daniel stepped forward, the heat rising. As they stood, opposite each other, the flame grew higher, curling around them like living hands. The air shook with power. The nobles watching from behind the crystal barrier gasped as the fire did not burn Daniel. Instead, it wrapped around both of them, weaving like threads of light. On the queen's wrist appeared a faint mark, glowing silver. On Daniel's chest appeared the same mark, glowing faint blue, connected by a line of fire stretching between them. The queen's eyes widened. Her claws shook. The bond was real, undeniable. The nobles screamed in shock, some even shouted in rage. The queen ripped her hand back, the mark fading into her skin. She turned away, her breath heavy, her voice sharp. "Take him out now." Daniel was led away, his steps still calm, though his chest burned with the new mark. The queen sat alone before the dying fire, her hands pressed against her heart, her whisper low. "No, I cannot let this be." But the bond had already taken root in her dreams, in her blood, and in her future. Whether she welcomed it or not, the queen had spent her life untouchable, her throne built on fear, her bloodline considered sacred. No mortal, no soldier, no noble had ever been allowed close to her heart. But after the ritual, her skin still burned where the bond had marked. The memory of the human's steady eyes would not leave her. She locked herself in her chamber, pacing like a restless predator, her long gown dragging across the crystal floor. "It is only a trick," she told herself. "The ritual cannot bind me to a fragile creature. It must be broken." Yet when she closed her eyes, she saw him again, standing firm in the fire, the mark glowing on his chest. For days she avoided him, keeping him locked in the guest wing under heavy guard, but it only made her mind worse. In council meetings, she lost focus. In her throne room, she felt restless. Every sound reminded her of his voice. Every silence reminded her of his calm. Finally, one night when the twin moons rose high and painted the palace in silver glow, she gave an order no one expected. "Bring the human to me alone," she told the guards, her voice sharp, but her heart beating faster than any battle had ever made it. Daniel was led through hidden halls to her private chamber, the place no outsider had ever seen. The guards left him at the door, the heavy crystal doors shutting behind him. Silence fell. The queen stood by the tall window, her back to him, the moons lighting her tall frame, her silver crown glowing faintly. For a long moment she did not speak. Only the soft hum of alien winds filled the room. Daniel broke the silence first, his voice low but steady. "Why have you called me here, Queen?" She turned slowly, her silver eyes glowing in the moonlight, her face calm yet strained. "Do you know what you have done?" she asked, her voice sharp but weaker than before. "You have poisoned my dreams, stolen my peace, forced your presence into my blood." Daniel's brows lowered slightly. "It was not my doing, the bond chose." Her claws flexed, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "Then let me test the bond," she said, stepping closer, her tall frame towering above him, the ground trembling slightly under her weight. "If it is false, you will break tonight. If it is true." She stopped, her voice catching. "Then I will know." For the first time, the queen lowered her guard. Her hand reached toward him, claws sharp yet trembling. Daniel did not move away. He lifted his own hand, smaller, fragile compared to hers. Yet when their skin touched, the bond surged, a pulse of warmth spreading through both. Her breath caught, her chest rising fast, the heat burning stronger than fire. She pulled back quickly, whispering, "No, this cannot be." But her body betrayed her pulse racing, her knees weakening for a single moment. The queen turned away, her hands pressed against the crystal wall, her voice low. "Do you not fear me, human? Do you not fear what I could do to you?" Daniel's voice was calm as ever. "I fear many things, but not you." The words struck her deeper than any weapon. She spun back toward him, her eyes burning silver, yet no laughter, no mockery came, only silence. Her gaze locked. Into his long and heavy hours passed in that chamber, neither willing to admit what grew between them, yet neither able to deny it. The bond pulling them closer, their hearts beating in rhythm. Finally, the queen spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Leave, before I change my mind." Daniel bowed slightly, his steps slow, but before the doors closed behind him, she spoke again, her words sharp, trembling. "Do not enter my dreams again, human." But when she lay down that night, her eyes heavy, she found herself once more in the starlit field of dreams, and across the distance, he stood waiting, his form glowing softly, his steady gaze fixed on hers. She did not laugh, she did not Mock. She only stared, her heart heavy with something she had never known before. When she woke, dawn breaking across the crystal sky, her first whisper was not command, not pride, but his name, spoken so low even the walls could barely hear it. The palace had grown colder in the days after that night. The queen had locked herself away, speaking little even to her closest advisors. Her people thought she was plotting war or planning a new conquest. But the truth was far stranger every morning. She woke with the same heaviness in her chest. Her body no longer felt the same. Her silver eyes burned brighter. Her heart raced faster. Sometimes her hands trembled. Sometimes her breath shortened. She had faced blades, poison, and endless battles, but never this strange weakness. The queen tried to ignore it, bury it under her duties. She held council meetings, judged disputes, commanded armies. But the bond followed her everywhere. Daniel's eyes appeared in her thoughts. His voice echoed in her ears, and her body ached with something she refused to name. One evening, after hours of struggle, she called for the royal healers, tall figures wrapped in black robes, their claws sharp, their knowledge deep. They bowed and examined her, running cold instruments along her skin, whispering to each other in low voices. Finally, one healer stepped forward, lowering his head. "My queen, there is life within you." The chamber froze. Her silver eyes narrowed sharply. "Life?" she demanded, her voice like thunder. "Explain!" The healer trembled. "You carry a child, Majesty. It is growing inside you." The words struck her like a blade. She rose from her throne so fast the room shook. "Impossible!" she roared, her voice echoing through the crystal walls. "My kind do not breed with outsiders. It cannot be." But the mark on her wrist burned faintly, as if mocking her denial. The healers backed away, terrified, but the queen dismissed them with a furious wave. Left alone, she pressed a trembling hand against her stomach, her chest rising quickly, her whisper sharp. "A child? From him?" The next day she avoided the court. Her advisors whispered in confusion. Her soldiers wondered why their queen seemed shaken. The nobles began to suspect weakness. Some even plotted in the shadows. Meanwhile, Daniel remained under guard, yet treated as a strange guest rather than a prisoner. He noticed the whispers, the unusual silence in the halls, the way servants lowered their heads and moved quickly. Something was wrong, and he knew it had to do with her. That night, the queen stood before her mirror, the moons glowing through the tall windows. Her reflection showed the same proud figure, the same silver crown, but she could feel it. The faint hum of new life deep inside. Her pride fought against it. Her empire's law cursed it, yet her heart whispered differently. For the first time in her life, she felt more than herself, more than her throne, more than her bloodline. She clenched her fists. "I cannot allow this," she said, but her hands trembled, betraying her will. The following morning, her closest advisor, a tall noble with cruel eyes, confronted her in the council hall. "My queen, rumors grow," he said, his voice sharp. "You weaken, you hide. The court demands truth." The queen's eyes narrowed, her voice cold as steel. "The court demands nothing of me." But the noble pressed, bowing, low yet with venom in his tone. "If weakness touches the throne, the empire will crumble. If whispers are true, that the human has touched you, then the people will turn." The queen's claws tightened, rage burning inside her. But before she could strike him down, the mark on her wrist glowed faintly again, as if reminding her that the bond was real. That night, unable to endure the silence, she called for Daniel. The guards hesitated, but her command was law. They brought him into her private chamber once more. She stood tall, though her eyes burned with storm. "Do you know what you have done?" she asked, her voice trembling between fury and fear. Daniel looked at her calmly, though he saw the strain on her face. "Tell me," he said softly. Her breath shook as the words broke free. "I carry your child." The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel's eyes widened for a moment, but he did not step back. Instead, he took a slow breath and said, "Then it is not just my child, Queen. It is ours." Her chest tightened at those words. She turned sharply, her back to him. Do not speak such weakness. The Empire will never allow this. They will call it shame. They will call it betrayal. Daniel's voice was calm, yet strong. Then, let them call it what they want, but do not call your child shame. The words pierced deeper than blades. Her claws scratched the crystal wall, her heart racing. She whispered low, almost to herself. Why do your words always bind me, human? But she knew the truth she could no longer hide. The unexpected change had come not only in her body but in her spirit, and nothing in the Empire could stop it now. The Empire was not blind. Rumors had already escaped the walls of the palace. Whispers spread through the markets, the barracks, and the high towers. The alien queen had changed. Her strength still burned, but her silence grew heavier, her steps slower, and her hand sometimes touched her stomach as if guarding something unseen. The nobles were the first to sharpen their tongues. In the great council hall they gathered, their silver armor gleaming, their voices cold. Our queen hides secrets, one declared. She keeps the human close while she drifts away from us, another added. If she weakens, the Empire will break. In the shadows of the hall, spies carried these words to the outer colonies, and soon the Empire buzzed with unrest. Some whispered that the queen was cursed, some whispered that she carried a forbidden child, and enemies beyond the stars smiled in silence, waiting for the Empire to crumble from within. The queen sat alone in her chamber, her hands pressed against the crystal table, the mark on her wrist glowing faintly in the moonlight. She had ruled with fear for years, yet now she feared something herself. Not blades, not assassins, but the storm rising within her own people. Daniel remained under watch, though his prison was more like a gilded cage. He walked calmly through the gardens, always watched by guards, always judged by passing nobles. But he heard the whispers too, and he knew the storm was coming. One evening the queen called him again, her voice sharper than steel yet tired. When he entered her chamber, she stood with her back to him, staring out at the glowing city below. Do you understand what you have done? She asked quietly, her tone heavier than ever. Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady. I gave you nothing you did not already carry, Queen. It was the bond that chose. Her claws scratched against the crystal rail, her silver eyes burning. You do not understand, human. They will rise against me, they will tear my throne apart, they will call for your head, and when they find the truth, they will demand the child. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then let them demand, he said. But you are the queen, you can protect what is yours. She turned sharply, her tall frame glowing in the light, her face torn between fury and fear. You speak as if it is simple. My empire is built on law, on tradition, and the law forbids this bond, forbids you, forbids. Her voice broke for a moment. Forbids the life inside me. For the first time, Daniel stepped closer without hesitation, his smaller frame standing firm before her towering body, his eyes locked with hers. Then break the law. He said softly, What is a throne worth if it costs you your child? Her chest rose sharply, her claws trembled, but she did not strike him. Instead, she turned away again, her voice low. Your words are poison, human, poison that I cannot spit out. The following days grew darker. Nobles gathered soldiers in secret. Whispers turned to plots, and enemies beyond the stars sent ships closer to the Empire's borders. The scent of rebellion filled the air. Finally, during a council meeting, one noble stood tall before the throne, his voice loud. My queen, the people grow restless. They demand truth. If the rumors are false, then prove it. Cast out the human. Crush him before all. Show them your blood is pure. The council roared in agreement, the hall shaking with their staffs. The queen's silver eyes burned as she sat on her throne, her hands gripping the armrests. She could feel the bond mark glowing on her wrist, her heart pounding with the life inside her. Slowly, she rose, her tall form towering over them all. Silence fell, her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You demand much from me, but remember, I am not your servant, I am your queen. The nobles bowed slightly, but their eyes burned with defiance. One dared to speak. Even a queen cannot stand against her people. Her eyes narrowed, her voice cold as ice. Then let them come, and let them see what happens to those who stand against me. That night, Storms rolled across the sky, thunder shaking the towers, lightning flashing against the crystal walls. The empire itself seemed to tremble as if warning of what was to come. In her private chamber, the queen stood alone, her hand pressed against her stomach, whispering to herself, "I will not let them take you." Her voice sharp, trembling, filled with something new. Not just pride, but protection. Across the palace, Daniel sat in silence under guard. But even from far, he felt the storm rising. He knew the queen would soon face a choice that could burn her empire or rebuild it from ashes. And far beyond, enemy fleets glowed against the dark stars, waiting, smiling, sharpening their blades, ready to strike when the empire tore itself. Apart, the rising storm had begun, and neither queen nor human could stop it from breaking. The storm had broken, not of thunder, but of voices and blades. Across the empire, nobles whispered louder than ever. Soldiers hesitated in their loyalty, and enemies pressed at the borders, waiting for weakness. All of it circling around one secret. The queen carried a human's child. Inside her throne hall, the queen stood tall, her silver crown glowing faintly under the pale light. Her people gathered below her. Hundreds of nobles, generals, and advisors, their eyes sharp, their voices cruel. One noble stepped forward, his armor black as night, his voice rising. "My queen, the empire demands an answer. What do you carry, and why do you protect the human?" The hall shook with shouts of agreement. Staffs slammed against the crystal floor, chants of purity and law rising. They wanted her to cast out the human, to erase the bond, to deny the life growing inside her. The queen's claws dug into her throne, her silver eyes burning. She felt the bond mark glowing on her wrist, her heart heavy with the life she now carried. For the first time in her rule, she stood not as a goddess untouchable, but as a mother about to choose. Daniel was brought into the hall, chains on his hands though his eyes remained steady. The nobles jeered, shouting, "End him! Burn him! Save the throne!" The queen looked down at him, her breath sharp, her chest rising. The empire waited. The choice hung in the air like a blade over her own neck. The high noble who had led the whispers stepped forward, his voice cold. "Prove yourself, Majesty, crush the human here. Show us your blood is untainted and the empire will remain loyal." The hall roared in agreement, the noise shaking the walls. But then silence fell when the queen rose from her throne, her tall figure glowing in the light, her step slow, heavy, echoing through the chamber as she walked toward Daniel. She stopped in front of him, towering over his smaller form, the chains rattling as he lifted his head to meet her eyes. For a long moment, the hall held its breath. The queen raised her hand, her claws gleaming. Everyone believed she would strike him down, even Daniel, though he did not flinch. But instead her claws cut through the chains, breaking them apart. The sound sharp, echoing, the hall gasped, voices of shock rising. The queen turned, her silver eyes burning brighter than ever. Her voice thundered across the chamber. "You want my choice? Then hear it well. I choose him. I choose the bond, and I choose the child I carry." The hall erupted. Some screamed in rage, some shouted in horror, but her voice crushed them all. "You call it shame," she roared, her voice like a storm. "But I call it future, you call it betrayal. But I call it life, you call it weakness, but I call it strength. For no throne, no law, no empire can command my heart." She lifted her wrist, the bond mark glowing like fire. And at the same time Daniel's chest glowed faintly, the line of light sparking between them for all to see. The crowd froze, their eyes wide. The queen placed a hand against her stomach, her voice lowering yet echoing with power. "This child is mine and no one will take it from me. Not nobles, not traitors, not enemies. If you stand against me, then you stand against the future itself." The chamber split. Some nobles dropped to their knees, stunned by her defiance. Others shouted in fury, drawing blades. But before they could move, the queen raised her hand, and the walls trembled, silver energy bursting from her throne, shaking. The hall with her fury. Daniel stood by her side, unchained, his eyes steady, not as a ruler but as a protector. Together they faced the sea of divided voices. Outside, lightning cut across the sky. the storm raging as enemy fleets hovered at the borders. But inside the palace, the greater storm was already breaking. The queen stepped forward, her voice softer now but sharper than steel. The Empire has laughed at the human, mocked him, hated him. But now you will see why the bond chose him. You will see why I did not break him. You will see why I carry his blood within me. The hall grew silent. Every noble, every soldier, every slave feeling the weight of her words. The storm of rebellion did not vanish, but for the first time, fear shifted. Fear of the queen's wrath, fear of her unbroken will. She turned to Daniel, her silver eyes locking with his steady gaze, and for a moment in the middle of chaos they shared silence, unshaken, unbroken. Then she lifted her child's name into the air, a name that would forever change the Empire. This is the heir, born of alien and human, born of bond, born of fire, and the Empire will bow. The chamber erupted, not with laughter this time, not with mockery, but with the roar of a future that could not be undone. The queen had chosen, and the Empire would never be the same again.